With the release of the newest Samsung S26 Ultra, I wanted to see how much we can get from the quad camera setup on it, pushing it in real-world scenarios and seeing what it's capable of. Is it worth the upgrade, or is this just a refined sequel? This is the new Samsung S26 Ultra, and how good are the cameras? So on the back we have actually a quad camera setup, each of them being a little bit different. The main camera sensor is a 200 megapixel camera sensor, while the wide is a 50 megapixel camera sensor. Then we have the two telephoto lenses, one is a 3x zoom and the other a 5x zoom, but the 3x zoom is just a 10 megapixel camera sensor, while the 5x zoom is a 50 megapixel camera sensor. So each of them is slightly different, and you can actually feel that in photos and videos. But how do they perform as a whole? So the main camera sensor, being a 200 megapixel camera sensor, means that you can take photos up to 200 megapixel. Thanks to this, they can be very sharp. I personally have not noticed to be that much of a difference when shooting in 200 megapixel mode or 12 megapixel mode. With 12 megapixel mode, it is a little bit better for everyday usage, as all the different sensors can shoot in that mode, and because of that, we can shoot in all different sensors and cameras when doing 12 megapixel. And yes, while I did say that the telephoto x3 is a 10 megapixel sensor, it still comes out as 12 megapixel photo. So there has to be some kind of, I guess, software or hardware extra to make that work. But essentially with 12 megapixel mode, you can shoot on all different lenses without having any problems, which is just better for everyday, very quick, run and gun style of shooting. That is why on this phone I have it set at 12 megapixels, so that it's just easy to use on all different focal lengths. If you want to push, you can push to 50 megapixel mode or 200 megapixel mode on the main camera sensor. Well, it is going to be sharper, it is going to take a little bit more longer to take that photo, and overall in my testing it did feel like it was slightly sharper, but it was definitely not feeling a huge difference to a 12 megapixel photo unless you really zoomed in and were looking for those extra details. So it really was a trade-off that it depends on how you look at the photo. If you want to do a quick photo which is gonna look great right from the get-go, I guess 12 megapixel is more than enough for everyday shooting. But if you are looking at that extra crispiness in the photos, the sharpness, then the 200 megapixel can help with that. Although remember, it's gonna take a little bit more storage than a 12 megapixel would. One thing that is to do with all of these cameras is that they look really punchy. What I mean by that is pretty much all of the lenses create a very saturated photo. Essentially, this is down to the software, not the hardware itself, because all the photos tend to look even more colorful than the real world scenario. Usually I would see that the camera on the Samsung S26 Ultra made the photos even more colorful and more vibrant than the reality was. And I feel like that is a good thing and a bad thing. On one side, some people might see it as something that is very nice to look at because it's very colorful, and it can make this kind of a situation where people are gonna think that it's better because it just is more brighter, just more vibrant. But the reality is, if you are looking at the photos to be as good as possible but in a realistic way, then this is definitely not the way to go. But you can always tweak those settings and those different filters to make that to your liking. But just straight from the camera app, without editing, without any editing in post-production on the phone or on a computer, or also no different filters, just straight from the camera app how it shoots, it is very punchy, very saturated to a point that is visibly over the top compared to the real world. So if you see a kind of like a blue grayish kind of a sky, it's going to be very blue on the Samsung S26 Ultra. So if you're after that kind of look that is very punchy, you're probably gonna like it. If you want something that is more realistic or a little bit more like a real camera, then Samsung is a little bit farther from it. It definitely feels like a smartphone camera. Also, it does feel a little bit over sharpened to how it really is, or should I say to the megapixel count that we have. It doesn't seem to be a real sharpness, it seems more like an over sharpening of the process. So in my opinion, the software itself is very powerful. That is the way I would describe it, that the software is really trying to make this as colorful, as punchy, as most vibrant it can get. I do feel like the worst lens of the 4 lenses that we have here is definitely the ×3 zoom. It is definitely the one that is lacking the quality the most, and sometimes even when shooting, when changing the different lenses, I would see the drop off of the quality between changing something like a ×1 and ×5 zoom. When I would change to ×3 in between, it definitely felt like it was a little bit lower quality than the 2 other ones. But on the ×3 you can get a very nice macro photo, so that is how I would probably do the macro with the ×3. It felt definitely the best for that. And while you can have the focus enhancer on this smartphone for the better macro, there were situations where it would jump all over the place and would be hard to shoot with, changing all over the place between the different lenses, and even sometimes just make the photo look horrible. When you turn that off and just do it by yourself on a 3x zoom, you would take a really good macro photo. So that is a big plus. If you want to take a macro photo with the 3x zoom, it's gonna look very good, and the focus distance isn't that far off. So you can get semi-close to the subject and get a really nice macro photo. That is a big plus. I always love it when the telephoto has the macro capabilities. Just make the photos look more professional. The ×5 zoom with 50 megapixel means that you can zoom in even more and not lose that much on quality. Yes, it's gonna be a digital zoom, like a ×10 or more, but at the same time, it's gonna look pretty good. And the software being the most pretty much strongest part of that smartphone, the one that it really shows through the photos, it can definitely hold up really nicely. So you can even take a nice moonshot with the Samsung S26 Ultra. And you can definitely feel that after some zoom, you can see that AI, post-processing to make the photo look better and sharper. It is very well done on the Samsung S26 Ultra, and it doesn't have that AI scream right away that you feel that it's just artificial. It's pretty nice. I would say that the zoom capabilities of the Samsung S26 Ultra are very good for a smartphone. And if we're just talking about straight out of the camera with just the stock app, I would say that the Samsung S26 Ultra is a solid performer overall. I think that people that are gonna get it are gonna be happy with it. But if you're someone that really wants to get the best camera on a smartphone, there are better options than the Samsung for a clear reason. For example, the iPhone it feels a little bit softer, but a little bit more natural. On the other hand, something like a Xiaomi 17 Ultra feels a little bit more photographic, and the hardware is really up there, like it's really, really good. But the Samsung is kind of stuck in the middle with a really big emphasis on the over sharpening, on the saturation. It is a very punchy kind of a photo. So if you really like that kind of style, you're gonna love it. But if you're someone that looks for something else, maybe this would not be the best option. And although I'm not a biggest fan of this, I know there are people that are gonna say this is probably the best. So I would say that at this point, it could be personal preference. It's gonna be a good smartphone for photos, but it's gonna be personal preference if this is how you like the photos to look like. But there is one more feature, a Pro mode. And in the Pro mode, you can really set up the photos the way you like to, and even shoot in JPEG and RAW. Thanks to RAW capabilities, you can actually edit that in post-production on your Samsung S26 Ultra or on a computer. Thanks to this, you can edit those photos the way you want to your liking, and really take the most out of the cameras that we have on the Samsung S26 Ultra, which is a huge benefit for those that like to take really nice photos with the phone that you have in your pocket, and you have a little bit more knowledge on how to push that. Especially if you want to shoot in RAWs and push them in post-production. If you like the way I edit these RAW photos, check out the link down below for my presets, with which you can edit in one click on Lightroom. Overall, the cameras are pretty sharp, and all of them, while different, perform very, very similarly, and overall feel very good. If you like that vibrant, punchy, sharp image, then you're gonna love the Samsung S26 Ultra. If you enjoy the music in this video or in any other of my work, check out the links down below for the copyright-free music for your video creations. But what about the video side of the Samsung S26 Ultra? In my opinion, the video is a little bit of a different case, where in a way it's very similar in the way it's processed with the sharpness and colors. There's definitely a lower saturation on the video side, and you can definitely see it when you press a little bit longer, where instead of a photo you take a video when you hold the shutter button, and it switches from one mode to another. You can definitely see how it changes from a very colorful, very vibrant photo to a much more, I would say, desaturated video, which shows kind of like how powerful the processing is for the photos, and at the same time how different it is for the videos. There definitely feels that there's a little bit less saturation and more contrast to it, but also the sharpness, because this can record up to 8K 30 frames per second, but I'm mostly shooting 4K 60 frames per second so that I can use all the lenses, because 4K 60 frames per second is available on all of these lenses. Thanks to this, you can smoothly switch in and out from wide-angle lens to a telephoto lens and show in more details what you're looking at. But I did notice that the sharpness overall felt a little bit over the top, where it was a little bit too unnatural. From what you would see with your eyes or a different smartphone or a camera, this definitely felt the most sharp, like an over-sharpened image. And if you're, for example, looking at waves and then there's some light bouncing off, you can definitely feel how this is going a little bit over the top to my liking, because it does seem that it's a little bit over-sharpened. So in specific scenarios, it can feel a little bit too much. In other scenarios, it would probably look pretty okay, depending on how you look at it, and it's still a great phone for video. I feel like my preferred style is a little bit different. So if you like the videos that you see on the screen and you see the samples and you like the way they look, then you're probably gonna be happy with them. But I feel like it's a little bit more like showing that, okay, we have 4K, we have 8K, and we're really pushing it to be really sharp so that if you look on the smartphone, you feel like, oh, this is really sharp. Look how this Samsung is super sharp. Is it really sharpness from the lens and the 4K, or is it a little bit more of the software side, which is not the side that I'm really loving. But like I said, you can shoot up to 8K, which is just incredible if you're gonna actually use it. One note, 8K in low light is a no-go because of the way the pixels work. In this mode, the pixels just get much less light, and because of that, it's much better to go with 4K for low light. Like I said, I use 4K 60 frames per second so I can zoom in and out from all the different lenses, and 4K 60 frames per second is still a super sharp image. Not only that, with 60 frames per second, you can slow it down in post-production to 30 frames per second and have a 50% slow motion of that shot, just making it a little bit more usable in everyday scenarios and also just looks smoother on the screen. But like I said, because of the over-sharpened feel, it is gonna look a little bit more like a smartphone video. One really neat new feature for video is the 360 stabilization. Thanks to this, no matter how much you turn the phone, it is gonna be horizon locked and really stable. But if you want to push this smartphone a little bit farther, you actually have a video pro mode. Once again, you can set the settings up the way you want to. Maybe you want a little bit higher or lower shutter speed, more ISO. You can really play around with the settings with it and really push those cameras to the maximum. Not only that, you can actually shoot in log. So if you wanted to really take out the most out of the cameras and the sensors you have here, you can actually use the log format and edit that in post-production, just getting the most data you can get from the camera sensors. So the video is going to be on the sharper and a slightly less saturated than photo look, but overall is a very solid performer and definitely a flagship level of video. And really quickly, to end this off, the extra features that you get with the Samsung S26 Ultra, because remember, this is also a phone. So one thing that is specific to the Samsung S Ultra series is the stylus you get on the bottom. So essentially in the body we have this, a stylus you can use on the screen and write on the screen. As you can see, you can write on the screen at any moment. You can just hide it into the body and it's being charged inside of it. Essentially, this is really cool if you like to take notes on a daily basis. You can just take it out and write with it. You know, it's always with you, so it's really nice, and you can just take notes with it. This is kind of like a feature that some people might say that is a must-have, something that is a game changer. For others, this is going to be something that is totally not important and really something that you would never use. So I'm gonna leave that for you to decide, but it's a cool feature to have. Also, a new addition is the privacy screen. Normally, without the privacy screen, as you can see, you can still see what on the screen there is. Now, while the colors are gonna be a little bit less, vibrant, if we put it to the side, look how fast it turns into pretty much black screen, or at least something that is hard to see for any other than you. So in that way, this is a really nice feature that isn't on other smartphones. And if you're someone that would love that feature, it's here on the Samsung S26 Ultra. As for charging, RAM, that kind of stuff is pretty much around the same as it usually was. But definitely the stylus and the privacy screen are something that is unique to the Samsung S26 Ultra, which is a cool feature to have on your smartphone. So in conclusion, the Samsung S26 Ultra, in terms of camera performance, well, it's not groundbreaking, it is a solid performer in both photos and video. Maybe it's not pushing the boundaries per se, but it's definitely refining what it already has. You can definitely feel that refined iteration from the previous models. But I do think it's time for a bigger camera update on the Samsung S Ultra series, and I cannot wait to see what the next iterations bring. That being said, what do you think about the Samsung S26 Ultra's camera's performance? If you have any more questions about it, let me know in the comment section down below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I hope you guys enjoyed this video once again, and I'll see you next time.